Happy 2026. This is the first episode of Creative Soul Life for this year. I'm your host, Charlotte Demolay, and I think this is episode 21. I really should start looking at that before I do my intro. So today's episode is all about getting ready for a new year, planning, assessing the past year, and kind of what I'm looking at going into this year. Now, I think I may have mentioned a couple of times that I'm a type A personality, or as I like to say now, I'm a recovering type A personality because I'm trying to slow my roll a little bit. So, for many, many years, I've done resolutions and very precise goals. And a few years ago, I started to try and kind of tone that down a little bit and take it easy. So, for this year, I am doing a few goals. They're kind of loose. My mom gave me this planner. So this is what I'll be using this year. It's a little woo-woo, but that's okay. I asked for this. I'm getting a little woo-woo myself sometimes. So I started working in this in December. Usually that last week of December, is when I do my reflection, my planning. But we were actually in Texas visiting with our kids for Christmas during that time period. And sometimes my oldest daughter and I, who is very similar to me with the goals and stuff, use that time together. But it was just too crazy, too much going on and everything. And I knew this was going to be like that. So I did a lot of my reflection portion at the beginning of December. So my 2025 was weird. It was strangely calm, which was good. I actually did not even do one of those family newsletters you send in your Christmas card because the year was kind of almost blessedly boring in that aspect of news per se. Uh, Big thing meaning we did not move in 2025, which was good. We're still in the lake house, still love it out here, still loving my 1 acre. And so a lot of the reflections and things were on kind of me personally, less about location and house and things like that. And I've talked about it in the last couple of episodes where I kind of took a break over the summer and fall because summer was weird. I actually got had living in Florida and being a bit of a sun worshiper my whole life. It's pretty important to go to the dermatologist regularly because I was one of those 80s kids with the baby oil and all that. And so, of course, what I'm going to say is probably pretty predictable, but they found a couple of pieces on my skin that were cancerous. And fortunately, the basal carcinoma, the mildest type you can get. So I had a bit behind my ear removed. It was a little more serious. They had to get stitches for that. And then later in the summer, a piece off my leg. Just that was one of the like scrape things. But both of those kept me inside, which I'm not used to. I'm used to being outside as much, if not more, than I'm inside. And so it kind of put me in that funk and slowed me down and had me do a lot of thinking, which was good. It was good for me. I did a lot of thinking about my art. I told you I've struggled a bit here moving away. I had a great network in Pinellas County where I was before. I was in a gallery, I was in several art groups. It is a thriving arts community out in Pinellas. And I kind of missed that. I have found a group nearby, the Brandon Art League, and these are some delightful people. I'm really enjoying getting to know them. I just sort of stumbled across them towards the second half of the year, and I'm starting to get involved with that now, which definitely helps fill that hole of having an art community around me. But not having gallery spaces and things around, maybe do a lot of reflection. And, when you're sitting, if you're a creative type, no matter what you make, you hit that moment when you don't have an outlet to put your creations, and all of a sudden it feels like it's piling up, and you go through the what ifs and the why bothers and everything. And that's kind of where I was this summer. So I did a lot of thinking. In fact, I took a trip to Texas this summer, and I did a lot of this weirdly on the flight out and the flight back. I normally read the entire time, and this time I had my little spiral out, and I was asking myself questions, and looking at that big view and low, all that kind of thing, all the exercises and things I've done over the years with goal setting. I kind of really helped define what I want out of my art career per se going forward. And you each, I've had what I call several different versions of my art career. And I think I'm labeling this one, I think it's Art 4, maybe it's Art 5, but it looks very different. I finally decided this is one time in my life where what I value over sales or accolades or whatever, I am valuing my freedom the most. I want time freedom. I want creative freedom. I want just anything you can think of with the word freedom. Um, Financial freedom would be good, but I mean, we're very fortunate. We're hitting near the true retirement years for my husband and myself, and so we have a little bit of that in there. It's not. It has made it where the financial is not the primary goal of my art career at the moment. Now, of course, it's nice. Who doesn't like to sell paintings? But the type of things I would have to do, the amount of driving I would have to do in order to do the things that I know, that help me sell more paintings, I'm just not willing to do that right now in this time and place of life. The thought of having time commitments and things that go along with that doesn't really coincide. We're starting to up our travel plans, and all but one of my kids is out of state, so I travel for that. My family in North Carolina. I have decided that that freedom, plus the creative freedom, the freedom to make what I want and not worry about if it sells or not, to experiment. And I've just kind of started a new set of experiments that I'll probably talk about on another episode. And there's no goal of who will buy this, because that's always that, when you're trying to make a career out of what your creative habit, who will buy this? I want to be free from that type of pressure as well. But I still have a lot of artwork. So one thing I did, and this was kind of a win for me this year, I did a deep dive in my existing art inventory, and I threw quite a bit of it out. I talked about that on my blog. I kind of cataloged it. I've always had a very good system I use for my art inventory, and I got that caught up. I went through it very carefully, went through my remaining art very carefully, and like I said, some I destroyed, some I resized. There were pieces I thought, well, I really like this portion of this composition, but I don't like it as a whole, or it's just too big. So I cut some things down. Some things I threw in my collage pile. They're no longer standalone pieces of art. They're going to be a part of some other piece of art one day. And it was very freeing. It was very freeing to go through this and kind of cull things down to pieces, even though some of them are old. There's a blog post on that. And there's still pieces that, I was a pretty good artist 25 years ago, and, I've progressed, but a lot of the stuff is still, to me, still a very worthwhile piece of art, however you want to phrase that. So I kind of culled down my art, got things organized, and then I started checking the photographs, descriptions. I've photographed most of my art, but ironically, this iPhone that I'm recording right now takes better pictures than my first digital camera I had back in like 2001 that I was using to photograph my art. This is a better camera, so I'm rephotographing a lot of it. If it's small enough to scan it, I do that because my scanner does incredible quality. And then I've been matting a lot of it and getting it listed. If it's above a certain price threshold, it goes on my art website, for sale, of course. And if it's below a certain threshold, it goes on my Etsy site. Both of these are under my name, DMillay.com with my art. Charlotte D. Millay is my Etsy shop. And it feels good to now have a plan with these things. And, I've had a few sales, so I guess the plan's working. And this gives me some of that freedom that I want, that I can package something up home and sell it, not have to be, scheduled for 9 o'clock on every Tuesday or something like that. So that was a good win of 2025, getting that process going. I'm not finished. I worked on it pretty solid for 2 months straight, and it was like, okay, I've got to get back to creating. I like to try and finish projects when they get started, but this one was still pretty hefty. And the decision-making process, I think, was what was hard about some of that. Some of the art, like there's one pastel piece of palm trees. I'm still haven't quite decided how I'm going to cut that down, but things like that. Some of the decisions take a little bit longer. The other win I feel like I had in 2025, I had for a long time been wanting to write kind of a collecting art guide for just normal people, not art snobs or art collectors. And what started this was my oldest child, who has literally been with me on my art journey since she was like 2 or 3. I took her to my college classes, not all of them, but I mean, she attended a few of them. Um, she's been there with me at the beginning. She's been to museums. She's been with me when I go on sketching outings. I used to take her to the zoo and I would sketch and she'd see the animals. She's been with there through it all. And a couple of years ago, she made a comment that she said her generation didn't know how to buy art. So they went into the big home box stores, and that's where they bought art because she felt intimidated going into a gallery or a show. And I'm like, you grew up in these, but still there's still that barrier there that that's not for regular people. That's for people, who are collecting and know about art. And that's just crap. I mean, most artists I know, they're selling to normal people who enjoy art, not hobsnob collectors. And so I wrote this guide. It's a one-page guide. It's very succinct and, well, front and back, but it sort of gives an easy entry if you feel that intimidation on collecting art, or you know artists and you would love to support them, but maybe their paintings, like some of mine, are a couple of $1,000s, and that's out of your price range, and you don't know, how can you support your favorite artist, and you're not there's lots of ways in this guide on how to support your local artist, how to start your art journey as a collector without walking into some New York Soho gallery or something like that. So it'd been on my brain for a couple of years. I was very tickled to finally get that out into the world. You can get it for free on my website. So that's was a big win in 2025 as well. Um, Around my house and my yard and things, it's like perpetually a project. So I don't know if I can count a lot of wins from that. We are a lot more settled into our home, and that feels good. I've reached out socially, which is fantastic. I found a garden club right at the beginning of 2025. I immediately met some friends. There's some ladies we go around and thrift shop and eat lunch and visit garden centers, and it's been wonderful. That was very hard when we first moved to Florida because we moved in 2019, and everybody knows what happened in 2020, and especially the area we were living in that was already half snowbirds, and then things being shut down and people being cautious. It took several years to be able to just meet anybody. So I was thrilled that I had been able to plug into this community so quickly. First with the gardening, and like I said, I've connected with an art group in a nearby town, and I am thoroughly enjoying that. We have monthly meetings and do some sort of creative thing or have a talk, and then once a month we get together on a Saturday and go out. The person who coordinates it picks a place, and we meet up and we do some sketching and drawing, and then we go to lunch. And I just went to my first one this January, the first Saturday in January, and it was a lot of fun. So that's on my calendar so far for what they have planned for this year. I've got that on my calendar, and I'll get back to a little bit of teaching. I've, like I said, got involved with this art group, and for each meeting, they try and do some sort of creative project learning type thing. So I've volunteered for 3 different ones. I'll do a kind of an art business talk, and then I'm going to do a print workshop, working with, doing different prints. And then in the fall, we're going to do a Frankenstein type paintings where you take old paintings, find in thrift stores, and do all kinds of spooky things to them, or fall themed or whatever. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and it feels good to be involved. It feels good to, kind of share some of the things I've learned over the years. And who knows, maybe I'll get back to teaching again. I don't quite want the commitment of it, but I do miss it. So I'm still wrestling with that. What I am hoping for in that vein are more demos and tutorials on this channel. That's something I would like to kind of pop up. And I've got a lot of videos, because I'm at the point that almost anytime I'm in the studio, I turn the camera on. So a lot of these that I already have, I want to go back and do some voiceovers and publish them and then continue on during the year. So that's kind of, so now I guess we're moving into 2026. I've already explained some of the things I'm going to do with the art group, kind of things I'm kind of hoping for with some of my art demonstrations. Um, Other things that I kind of put in my planner, and it's not so much hard and fast goals. One of my huge priorities this year is my health. I've wrestled with some things last year beyond just the little spots that were found, and I am moving on and up. Well, I don't know how to say it. I feel like I'm turning a corner. Things are improving health wise. I mean, I'm just in that. If you're a woman of similar age, you know exactly the things that I'm talking about and wrestling with. And so I'm feel like things are getting better on the whole midlife woman front. So that's good. I'm looking forward to that this year. And I've got several things and some plans in place to continue to improve my health over 2026 because that is a huge priority. And not just my physical health, but also my mental, spiritual health. I am trying to get a prayer meditation practice, daily practice going. I haven't been extremely consistent with it, but I'm trying. That's my habit of 2026 is daily prayer meditation. And then, of course, I have some art goals. I want to get back into a more regular studio practice. And I think some of the things that were holding me back in 2025 kind of work through some of that, like I was talking about, the excess of art and things. And also, when you've been working as long as I have, where art is, even if I was doing environmental education, I still have an art business going. I've had an art business for over 30 years. I mean, I'm an artist. It's you make, you hope to sell it. It's what you do. And some of that comes with the mindset of each time you make or create something, what am I going to do with it? Is this sellable? Is this, where would I do this? How can I? And it gets in your way. I first experienced it very heavily back in the early 2000s when I was doing my art teaching. I was doing art markets and different things. That was probably the most prolific time period of my art because I was doing all the things. And I know, especially with the art markets, you get into this mindset of, okay, roosters was a big thing. I painted some roosters, or chickens. I love chickens. They're just so cute. And I painted some. And I mean, I was selling them before the paint could dry. And I paint acrylics. That was pretty quick. So all of a sudden, then everything had, I should just paint a whole bunch of chickens. And they sold. But when you get into that, oh, I've got to paint stuff that sells. I happened up in Virginia. I painted some bees and boom, they sold. So I started painting more bees. And it's a little bit inhibiting when you switch into the paint what people will buy. And there's a time and place for that. Absolutely. If you're doing art markets, you need pieces that will sell to help pay for the booth fees. But at this point, I really want to push and develop my ideas, my creativity. Really want to start working with people and figures in my paintings again. And so my artistic goal over 2026 is more of development, more personal development, more of skill development, more of creative development. And again, I want to get back into a regular studio practice because like anything, if you're going to learn Spanish or learn the flute, if you don't practice it, you're not going to get good at it. And there's some things with my art I'm very, very good at, and there are some things that I'm not as good at. I've always felt people were very challenging to me. I've painted people in the past, and I've done it successfully, but it's still a challenge, and it's one I really want to push through. And I'm not going to do that if I'm not in the studio creating. So more studio time, more studio practice, more creating just for the sake of creating without any regard whatsoever to what I'm going to do with it. If I make it and throw it in the garbage, that's okay. It's creating for the sake of creating and getting those juices flowing. So that's some of my artistic goals for this year. Um, Personal projects and things, I have been schlepping around my scrapbooking for years and years and years. I've been a scrapbooker since way in the day. I think the first time I got introduced to it was a Creative Memories party in something like, I don't know, late 1990s, I guess. I think it's been that long. And I love it, but of course, early 2000s, all my photos went digital. I still have a lot of physical supplies and physical photos from the 90s and early 2000s. So this is the year I am going to get hardcore. I have a whole cabinet, and then part of one of these cabinets has scrapbooking supplies and photos, and that's just too much. So that's one of my huge personal creativity goals is to work on that scrapbooking. Um, as far as that, other than that, I haven't made, specific. A lot of times I'm on Goodreads, and of course, Goodreads has you do your reading challenge. I haven't even filled mine out for this year. I don't think I hit mine from last year. It was 40 books. I am going to do a blog post. I usually try and do an annual blog post because I do read a lot. I did a lot of rereading this year. So I read well over 40 books, but there are a couple of series that I reread that I'd read before. And so I probably read closer to about 60 books this year, but I don't count rereads, so it's not in my challenge count. I haven't really set a number. I'll pick something. I might just stick with the 40. I don't have any serious, I need to read this or that. That's one of the things in this whole downsize mindset. I still have, well, sort of a bookshelf and a half of books. Half of the bookshelf are scrapbooks or art books, reference books. So about a bookshelf and a half. Actually, 2 rows of those are cookbooks. I'm kind of working through those too. But I always have this sort of goal of kind of reading through and getting rid of some of those things, in anticipation of the next move, which hopefully won't be for a decade or so at least. But that is one thing I've also struggled with is just clutter. I'm extremely blessed. The home we're in now, like it was in Texas, the formal living room, dining room is my studio and office. So it's a nice size space, and yet it's packed to the brim. And I've hit a point that kind of bothers me. It's hard to, I love trying new projects. I mean, this past year was the berry houses, and you can see that on the YouTube channel. I have several demos on that. Love doing that. That was something I learned through the garden club, meeting up with them. That was a class I took in January and just absolutely loved it. I've made half a dozen or so berry houses and thoroughly enjoy it. But that takes some supplies. And I'm so packed with things that I don't feel like have the breathing room to try new things. And I want that. That's a part of my creative soul is trying new things and trying projects and seeing an idea and going, I might try and make that. I have a wine kit that my kids gave me for my birthday in 2024, or maybe it was Mother's Day. Um, and it's actually sitting on the table behind this camera. I want to get that going. But like I said, when you've got so much clutter and things, it sort of gets in your way. So a bit of decluttering is in order for 2026. Make room for more creativity, more ideas. And it's more of that, less about projects and stuff, but I want the freedom to be able to explore my creative ideas because that truly feeds my soul. So that's how my 2026 is looking. Um, Oh, I forgot to talk about my word of the year. I've been doing that for probably about, I guess it came in vogue maybe about 10 years ago. And it's kind of neat. I was starting my prayer meditation practice and I was meditating and I was kind of thinking about a word for the year. And it just came to me. I started seeing these ribbons, little blue ribbons that look like water flowing. And the word flow came into my mind. And it is perfect for my word of the year for 2026. I want to flow into the things that I like to do, the art, the crafts, the gardening. I want to just not be on a rigid schedule or a rigid agenda or worried about to-do list or what I did and did or didn't get done. I want to flow. I want to flow with my energy levels. I'm thinking of things as sort of high tide, low tide, things like the gardening and bed building and out in the yard. Those are high tide, high energy things. Um, Getting art uploaded on Etsy at my computer, that's a low tide, low energy thing. So I'm trying to kind of schedule my day that way of if I'm feeling high energy or low energy. Or one day last week, I was spreading mulch and I pushed it a little too hard, and the next day was a complete low energy day. It's okay. I had low energy things that I could pull from and work on. And then I don't feel like I've lost a day or not get anything done. When I'm starting to divide things in my head that way, I can just keep flowing. So that's my word of the year. It's my 2026 word of the year, flow. My daily habit I'm working towards is prayer, daily prayer meditation. I artistic goals are to get steadier studio practice, more consistent studio practice, and push myself into some of the developmental goals, such as working with faces and people, figures that I'd like to put into my artwork. More creative, creating for the sake of creating, not worried about is it going to sell or not, where it's going to be, and is it going to be on camera? I actually have created a couple of things that were not on camera just so that I wouldn't have that, oh, is this good pressure? That is something that this thing has, I have heard a lot of creatives talk about, that it's this invisible eyes and it puts an additional layer of pressure. So some of my creativity, I'm just doing off camera. It's for me. If it's a successful piece or I enjoy it, I'll share some photographs. So that's the artistic goal. My personal creative goal is the scrapbooking, and then lots of smaller things along the way. But again, I'm just going to flow. I'm not going to worry too much about it. There's no check boxes. I have no charts. I have no, check in, these are not SMART goals. They're not specific. They are not measurable. I guess they're sort of specific, but they're not measurable. I'm not worried about them on a timetable. I'm flowing. That is 2026. I have already made a vision board. I will put that up at the end of this video so you can see that. So it's been a good start. I'm looking forward to 2026. What about you? What are you up to? What does your planning look like? Are you still in type A mode with resolutions and goals, SMART goals? That's okay. There's a time and place for that. I quite at least a couple of decades of my life. That's how I was. That's how I was wired. That's how I worked, and that's how I got things done. And no shame in that at all. I'm just in a different place in life right now. I'm more in a flow state, not a go state. So, what does yours look like? What does your planning routine look like and your rituals look like? What do you have in mind for 2026? And most importantly, how are you going to be creative and feed your soul? Let me know.